everyone, and welcome to the Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. For most, a job is just a job, routine, predictable, safe. But what happens when routine shifts, when the familiar becomes the unexplainable? Tonight, we explore the stories of the supernatural at work. Spirits seen by night nurses, security guards, and the like. It makes you wonder, what draws these spirits to the workplace? And why is it that most of these encounters seem to happen in the dead of night? Lingering souls trying to tell us something or simply passing through. There's something a little unsettling about your workplace becoming a doorway to the unknown. So, let's get started, shall we? I work as a supervisor in the cashier area of a casino, and for years I've been on the graveyard shift. It was around 10 years ago, back when we still closed the floor at 4 a.m. The nights were long, often quiet toward the end, but that night still lingers in my mind. It was a little after 5 a.m., and I was alone. My assistant had run home for a bit. I didn't mind since I was wrapping up paperwork, but the silence in the casino at that hour always felt different. It wasn't the usual kind of quiet. It was heavy. I stood at the counter, flipping through forms, my hair falling onto my face as I concentrated, and that's when I noticed something, just for a split second. My hair moved, or at least I thought it did. It was such a fleeting thing that I almost dismissed it, chalking it up to my own restless mind. And then I realized it wasn't just my hair. One of the swivel chairs behind the cashier station was spinning, slowly. I froze. The chair creaked faintly as it turned, the sound sharp against the stillness of this empty casino. I stared at it, trying to make sense of why it was moving. There was no one else around. The air conditioning wasn't on, and there wasn't even the faintest breeze. And yet, it moved. The chair slowed its spin until it stopped completely, facing me. It felt deliberate. A chill was crawling up my spine, and my hands were actually trembling as I set down my pen. My eyes were darting in the shadowy corners of the room. Was someone there? Was I imagining things? I sat down, trying to steady my nerves a bit, convincing myself I was just tired. Maybe I'd wait for my assistant to get back before I finished the paperwork. And then the phone rang. It was surveillance. Their voice was calm, almost too calm, but there was a strange tension behind it. "Hey, did you see that?" I gripped the receiver tighter. Yeah. What the hell was that?" They laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that puts you at ease. It was the kind of laugh that people use when they don't know how to explain something. It wasn't until weeks later that I thought that I should ask if they saved the footage so I could see it. But I already knew the answer. Back then, we still used old tapes, wiped every 2 weeks. If the tape wasn't flagged, it was already gone. Even now, though, I wish I could see that video to prove it wasn't all in my head. Maybe it's better that I didn't. Some things are easier to leave unanswered and just keep mysterious. Definitely a what the hell moment, though. One that I still think about, especially at night. The worst summer job I ever had wasn't really the worst job ever, But one isolated incident kept these feelings resonating through the years. When I saw this question, I knew I had to answer. I was a summer camp youth club leader at the YMCA for 1 year. I'd already been working for the Y, but that was the first year they'd asked me to be a camp counselor for 2 weeks in July. Usually it would be my lead that attended these trips, but she was just about to give birth or had just given birth. Either or, I was next in line. It was extra money, and a month before I got that offer, my boyfriend at the time cheated on me with my friend at the time, Carrie Bernadette McLennan. That snake bitch ruined my summer schedule indefinitely. Yet another big incentive to get away for a few weeks. Sure, I'd be watching over some kids, but what's the worst that could happen? The morning arrives and me and the other camp leads are supposed to show up early for an orientation. Then the kids would arrive shortly after. Each lead receives 5 kids for their troop. I wish that I could say I remember all the kids' names that I had in my troop. I know there was a Tabitha because we called her Tabby Cat, but out of the girls I had, the only name I distinctly remember, and will always remember for the rest of my life, was Beth. But why Beth? Here's why Beth. And this shit literally started on the first day. Well, night, because that's when she started scaring the girls. I don't know if it was even a full moon that night, but Beth kept telling everyone that something changes in her during a full moon. Once her parents had found her on the front lawn with bloodied clothing after a full moon. Dumb shit like that. A few of these girls were churchgoers, so Beth's demonic claims were really getting to them. Oh yeah, Beth told them that she could talk to the devil before the full moon thing. The cabin, all 6 of us shared, was built like a miniature log cabin. Inside each wall, aside from the entrance, had 2 slabs of woods on it, resembling bunk beds. The first thing everyone did was pick their bunks and set their sleeping bags on them. I, of course, had to be above Beth, as the other 4 girls had linked up immediately as bunkmates. The camp cabins are relatively spread apart from each other. Each cabin has a small trail that joins into a larger central pathway. Depending on which way you took, it would lead you to either the food hall or the art center. Or swimming, archery, and the rec, that was going left and right, but on the other side of the pathway. Like, if you were to keep walking straight out of the cabin, you'd find yourself at a huge lake with docks and kayaks. The cabin my troop stayed in had a beautiful view of the lake, and my bunk had a perfectly unobstructed view of it through one of the small windows. But that means so did Beth. Still, the same first night, I'm falling asleep and I can hear the girls all chatting below me. Their conversations make me squirm in my sleeping bag, thinking about being so cringy at that age, and if I wasn't already slightly disturbed by their bursts of laughter and whispers, Beth had to make shit weird again. From below me, I can hear her get way louder than the other girls' whisper squeaks. She goes, "There's someone floating above the lake. No, look, there's really someone out there." I'm turned facing the wall, and I can hear the girls slowly grow quiet. None of them move, though. They're all apprehensive to leave the warmth of their bunks on the possibility of being fooled by one of Beth's crazy claims. For me, though, all I had to do was turn over. So I did. I'm looking about 120 yards from our window to the water, and suddenly I felt that impending sense of doom, that deep fight or flight fear. Beth wasn't lying. I saw a man suspended just above the water of the lake. If he was in the water, I would have thought that he'd drown, but he was floating above the water. His shadow, it was visible on the calm waves under him. One of the girls eventually gets up to look. She sees it too, and calls for the other girls to come to the window. They all press against it, looking at this anomaly. This blocks my view of the lake, but almost right after they all gather at the window, they all begin to scream and run back to their beds. Pretending I'm asleep, I can hear them all talking back and forth about how a blue light came up from the lake and pulled the man down into the lake. They argued if they saw a tentacle reach through the blue beam of the light to grab the man. One of the girls was quietly sobbing, and I fell asleep to Beth's voice repeating, "See, I told you so." The next day, I'm shocked that none of the girls are bringing it up to me. Like, none of the girls tried to tell me what happened the previous night. I couldn't tell them I was fake sleeping to ignore their cries of terror, so I just left it alone too. But me and 5 tiny witnesses did see something. So, what was it? A bit of background. When my wife was young, her parents and siblings lived with one set of her grandparents. Her grandfather was murdered in the home. It happened in his bedroom upstairs. The room was primarily used as storage for the next 20+ years. Her parents tried to sell the house multiple times, but living in a small town, everyone knew, and the house wouldn't sell, so they stayed. Years later, and while my wife and I were engaged, there was a murder trial which I attended in support of her family. I saw the crime scene photos. Important later. Another few years later, we had 2 kids. The oldest was 6 at the time. My wife's family does not like to talk about the murder, and our kids don't know about the murder to this day. My father-in-law decided that he wanted the room where the murder happened to be a hangout for the grandkids when the family was in town. He put sleeping bags and a TV in the room ahead of the holiday days-long get-together. We didn't like it, but we stayed silent since the murder was a sore subject. My father-in-law also wanted all the grandkids to sleep together in that room. We were the first to arrive, and my son went into the room alone. He usually couldn't sit still long at that age, so after a couple of hours, I decided to check on him. And here's our conversation. During the whole conversation, he was still and rigid and would not look away from the TV. "Hey buddy, is everything okay up here?" "Yeah." "Okay, have fun." "Daddy, do I have to sleep in here? I don't want to." "Why not?" "I'm not alone." Every hair on my body stood up. "Well, yeah, I'm here with you, buddy." "No, there's someone in here with us." Are they nice? Mean? A grown-up? A kid? "A grown-up." "What are they doing right now?" "They're watching you." "You never said anything like this at your grandparents' house before, and you've been here a lot." "They don't leave this room, and I've never been in here before." "Where are they now?" Without looking away from the TV, he points to the far corner where his great-grandfather was murdered, and he said, "They're standing over there. They don't move much." "Okay, buddy, you don't have to stay in here." And he left the room with me. My dad worked in security. I got into it after he passed. One night I was called on my night off. They needed someone to go fill in on another site. I'd never worked the site before, but hey, overtime. I accepted. It was one of my dad's old sites. So it's 0200. I'm doing my rounds. I enter one of the buildings, and I think I see someone moving up ahead. It's 0200, and the building is locked. There shouldn't be anyone in there. I quietly close the door behind me and creep up for a closer look. At the end of the hall is a security guard, which is odd as I'm the only guard on duty at the time. So I'm eyeing this guy, and and I noticed the uniform. It's for a company that doesn't exist anymore. In fact, it's for the company my dad worked for when he was at this site. So it hits me that this is my dad. I'm standing there, watching him. He's apparently doing a round of the building that I'm patrolling. I watch him. He looks directly at me, as if he could see me. He looks at me for about 30 seconds or so, and then he turns the corner. I ran to catch up with him, but he was gone. Almost 2 years later, I still swear I actually saw him that night. I don't know if it was a ghost, if I was hallucinating because it was one of his old posts and I was emotional, or if maybe somehow time loops exist and I actually saw him working the site in the past. I honestly don't know, but every time I have a night off and they can't find anyone to fill in, I jump at it, no longer for the overtime, but with the hope that whatever happened that first time happens again. I filled in over 20 times there since that encounter, and I haven't seen anything since. My husband and I stayed at a super old hotel in Santa Fe, New Mexico. At the time, I didn't really believe in paranormal things like ghosts, mainly because nothing had ever happened to me. The old room that we were staying in had this decorative wooden chair that had a slanted seat. I took note of the slant because I wound up putting my computer bag on this chair and felt comfortable doing so. I'm super careful with my electronics, and the slanted seat made it so that my bag slid all the way to the back of the chair, and so that it couldn't fall. I also hung a nice new dress on the back of the chair. We went out for sightseeing, and when we came back, my dress was on the floor near the chair. I wondered if housekeeping had touched it, even though we had a do not disturb sign on our door. Oh well, we ordered some dinner and went to bed. My husband and I were laying in bed in the dark, talking, almost falling asleep, when suddenly we heard a super loud slam. It was so loud we shot awake and both turned on the light. There, on the other side of the room, a good 10 to 15 feet from the chair, was my computer bag. It was like someone had lifted it and threw it down. There's no way that it just fell off the chair that far away, and the chair's seat was slanted backwards toward the wall. It would have been hard for just about anything to fall off, especially forward and 15 feet away. And it was a slam to the ground. I was so terrified, but my husband just shrugged it off like, I guess this place is haunted like a lot of places in Santa Fe. Guess the ghost doesn't like our stuff on its chair. I demanded that we sleep with the light on. I didn't even have the courage to check if my computer was okay until the next day. For anyone wondering, it was fine, thank goodness. It had a nice case on it. Well, the next morning, my husband asked the front desk if the hotel was known to be haunted, and the guy just laughed and said, "Oh, what? Did you see the little girl?" No, we hadn't seen a little girl, but we certainly had seen something. Update for those of you who are wondering, the hotel was the Hotel St. Francis, and I found a picture online of the chairs on a random Yelp review. I guess a few of their standard rooms have this chair, so the pictures probably aren't the chair. But if you're into the paranormal, check out Hotel St. Francis. Maybe you'll see the little girl. About a year ago, I was at my dad's house taking care of the dog for a week because he had gone camping with some friends and my sister. My wife was also gone to Colombia with her family for a month. My in-laws asked me to take care of their dog while they were gone, and so I of course said yes. So there I am, first night at my dad's house with two dogs who had been playing together all day. I decided to go to bed around 10, so I lock the front door and the back door. I make sure every door in the house except for my bedroom door is closed, and I fall asleep. At about 12, I hear the dogs freaking out, barking and whining, so I jump out of bed to go check on them. On my way downstairs, I see the back door is unlocked and open. I look down at the dogs. They're both staring at the basement door, whining and growling while laying in a puddle of their own pee. I realize dogs have accidents, but not these ones. Not at this time. I see the basement door is open, so I have 911 ready to be called on my phone, and I go downstairs. I searched around for a while, even though I wasn't sure what I was looking for, until I decided to go back upstairs and clean off the dogs. At about 1 a.m, the dogs are finally clean and no longer focused on the basement, so I make sure the basement door is latched, and I go back upstairs after making sure the back door is locked as well. At about 2 a.m, I once again hear the dogs barking and freaking out, so I run downstairs. Once again, I see the back door wide open, so is the basement door. But this time, both dogs are staring out the window, looking into the backyard. So I don't bother going downstairs, I just close the door. I run to the back door and I close it and lock it as hard and as fast as I can. I go upstairs, and I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, but both dogs slept on the bed with me. After about a week, my dad gets home and I ask him if we can watch his home cameras for the first night that I was there. He keeps it all on his cell phone. As we're watching, I was just looking to see if anything or anyone even went near the house during the night. Oddly enough, there was nothing. The only weird thing is that around 12 and 2, the back door randomly flings open with nothing going in or out. And you can see from a camera from a different angle in the house that I clearly lock the back doors every single time. My dad says there's been no issues with locks any other day before or since then. So if my dad's house is haunted, I guess whatever's there doesn't like me too much. Years ago, I worked as an orderly in a small hospital on the night shift. Most nights were uneventful, just a routine of answering call lights and cleaning up messes. But there was one room, the kind you never forget. The call light for that room had a mind of its own. It would go off at random, even when the room was empty. When there were patients in there, they'd insist they hadn't touched it. No one could ever explain it, and after a while, it became a strange little mystery. The older nurses had their own explanations. They'd say that it was Mary, a former patient, an elderly woman who had spent months in that room before she passed away. "She's just asking for help," they'd whisper, half serious, half joking. It turned into a running joke. Any odd sound, flickering light, or unexpected call in that room, it's just Mary looking for attention. We all laughed, but late at night, when the hospital was quiet, I'd catch a certain unease in the nurses' voices. I didn't think much of it at the time. The years passed, life moved on, and I left that job behind me. Now, 35 years later, I find myself back in the same hospital. This time it's just a retirement gig, something to keep me busy. The place has changed a lot, but there's still something familiar in the way that it feels after dark. Mary's old room is gone now. It's been converted into a surgical area, bright, sterile, and modern. Nothing about it looks like the room I remember, and yet, sometimes when I pass by that wing late at night, with all the lights off, I feel it again. It's always just out of the corner of my eye, a shadow, a figure, standing there in the PACU, still and quiet, as if waiting. I tell myself that it's just an optical illusion, something about the way the light falls or my aging eyesight playing tricks on me, but it never fails to send a chill down my spine. A few weeks ago, I mentioned the story to an old friend who's worked here all these years. I told her about Mary, about the call light, about the strange shadows I sometimes see now. She laughed at first, but the next time I saw her, she swatted me on the arm. "You had to go and tell me that story," she said, shaking her head. "Now I'm seeing her too." She was half joking, but her face told a different story. She looked uneasy, her eyes darting towards the hallway where Mary's room once stood. I still pass by the area every now and then. I still see the shadow, just for a second, always in the corner of my vision. I remind myself that it's nothing, just a trick of the mind. But sometimes, I wonder if Mary ever really left. Maybe she's still there, waiting for help, for attention, or maybe just for someone to notice her. This is not conventional therapy by any means. However, I tend to use this platform like it is. Mothers with incarcerated lovers. My son's name is Marco Jr. We call him MJ for short. His dad, Marco Sr., has been held at the LSP for half a decade. Round trips there and back close to 6 hours. It's not easy on the gas tank, but it's important to me that MJ gets to see his dad and have him be a part of his life in any way that he can before he's released, and he's seen as a stranger when he comes home. We try to make it up there at the end of the month, typically around payday, so I can fill my tank. Last weekend, we had the same plan. When we got there, me and MJ were searched as procedure, but right afterwards, they told us Marco's compound was on lockdown. That sucked. What a waste of gas, makeup, and effort. I wish that they had something on their website to update us with stuff like that. I was pissed, but nothing that we could do about it, so I turned around and we went back out to the car. Heading home, we were about an hour into our drive. I've been trying to keep the atmosphere light by playing his Wiggles CD, singing to every goddamn one of those songs, trying to distract MJ from sad feelings, questions that I didn't want to explain, because I really didn't know why Daddy couldn't come see us. The guard I spoke to wasn't like, "Oh, here's what's going on right now." I was equally in the dark, 2 peas in a pod, listening to the Wiggles. It's wild to be a parent and have to share these experiences with your child. I read a lot about adverse childhood experiences after Marco got arrested. It's called an ACEs test. I got a pretty decent score. I'm sure Marco would too. The generations of trauma pass down to the next. My goal as a parent is for MJ to check off less of those boxes, get a lower score on this thing than I did. So, we're driving, and in between songs, as one's fading out, I can hear MJ playing with paper. Trying not to divert my attention from the road for too long, I quickly looked over to see him messing around with an envelope. I ask, "Where'd you get that from?" He said a guard gave it to him. I'm like, "What? When did they do this?" MJ was by my side the whole time, and other than the woman I was working with, there wasn't anyone else around us. For sure not within the proximity of slipping my son a letter. Adding to the weirdness, when I ask what they looked like, MJ describes someone that I for sure didn't see in there. He said this guard had broken sunglasses, like one of the lenses was missing in the frames, and the eye that he could see was all black. He actually portrayed this guard as scary looking. MJ also said that he knew his name. The guard called out to him to get his attention. He said, "Hey, MJ." When he turned around, the guard handed him the envelope and walked away. How could I have not seen this happen? If it wasn't for the physical proof he was holding in his hands, I would have just gone along with his imagination. Instead, I gently snatched the envelope out of his hands to get a closer glance at it. But when I saw the envelope had a familiar handwriting, it said, "Love, Marco." I put on my hazards and pulled off the road so I could mentally process MJ's weird story and figure out what was inside the envelope. It was, in fact, a letter from Marco. He would always write us a big front and back letter for me and MJ to read when we got home, filled with positive updates about the progress he's making with work, funny stories, and mostly how much he loves and misses us. It was also dated that day. I thought that Marco must have given the letter to a CO, asked him to deliver the message to us when he got there. It's beyond me. Regardless, I eventually ignored its creepy delivery and was just happy to see what we got. After figuring out it was a letter from Daddy, MJ wanted to still wait until we got home that night to actually read through it. So, we got back on the road, finished the last leg of the trip, full discography of the Wiggles all the way back to Yummy Yummy. Marco would call from jail a few days later, and it only piqued the creepiness of this whole letter thing to like a brand new level that neither of us could make sense of. So, they had that lockdown the day of our visit. I spoke to Marco on the phone that morning, telling him to plan on us being there close to 6. Marco wasn't involved, but he said that there was a huge fight that broke out before noon. Guards knew that it would only escalate between the two groups, so they shut the whole yard down, put everyone back in their cells. When the COs performed a count to make sure everyone was in their cells, they discovered 2 prisoners unaccounted for. That had everyone on staff running around looking for them. When Marco saw a CO named Lewis walk by his cell, he stopped him, asked Lewis the favor of giving us the letter if he saw us that day. He told him what time we were going to arrive and showed him a picture of us that he had. Marco said that he and Lewis were cool with each other, so Lewis took the letter. When I let him know that NJ got to meet him when we were there, Marco said that wasn't possible. I told him, well, somebody else gave MJ your letter then, but it was delivered and we read it right when we got home. I then told him what the letter talked about to solidify that yes, we did get it, and yes, we did read it. Marco, again, almost defensively, replies that it wasn't possible for us to have received the letter because it was delivered back to him later that next day while they were still in lockdown. Marco says that the prisoners that went missing, they didn't get too far, and Lewis had been the first officer to find their hiding spot. The inmates, they strangled and stabbed him before the other COs could come to his rescue. Marco said that Lewis was a really good guy that all the inmates liked. Everyone was shaken up about it. I'm on the other end of the phone line, obviously doing my best to console him because he sounds genuinely affected by the passing of Lewis, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, this is crazy. I have this letter around here somewhere. So while we're on the phone and I'm listening to him talk and reminisce about Lewis, I'm tearing apart the house looking for this letter to prove I'm not crazy. But I can't find it. Not in the house, not in the car. MJ didn't know where it went either. I did a more extensive search after I got off the phone with no better luck. Now it's been over a week, and neither MJ or I have seen that letter since, though both of us know that we had it at one point in time. So, what now? Just let it go, right? Don't dedicate my life to solving this mystery of the teleporting letter and Lewis the ghost. I'm sure obsessing over this would traumatize MJ, add to his already growing ACE score. So, just let it go, right? Right? But wow, that's a hard thing to swallow and just keep on moving like my perception of reality hasn't been glitterified. And since I can't seem to let it go, I I'm sharing my story here. I don't really know why, but maybe somebody else has had an experience with a teleporting letter. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. Thanks for joining me. Whether it's your first time or you're a regular, your support means the world over here. We've got brand new episodes every Friday night, and keep those eyes open long enough for those deep sleep videos. Subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. Big thanks to those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of our patrons whom we appreciate so very much. Tracy S, Mary H, Tanya F, Tamara K, Monica L, ZoeWatt, Chelle B, Donald C, The Dark Cosmos, Marion T, Rat Girl, Alisha S, Erin G, Nikki H, Mr. Revenant, Naz K, Brendon G, Paul T, Nicholas C, Lissane, Arlene F, Adrienne, and TF Parham. If you want to support the Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/thedarkesthour, or click the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, amandadarkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.